All right, I'll go ahead and get started as it's 4:30 Pacific and 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. So welcome everyone. I'm Callie. I'm the head of marketing at Workit Health, and I'm so excited to bring to you today our third community event. We've had a few of these that are all virtual during the crazy times we're living in now with COVID and whatnot. And so this is specifically talking about the issues facing and the experiences of LGBTQ plus people in recovery. So I will introduce our very own Chris, who will be moderating the panel and offering some questions and prompts for discussion. And then we'll also, after Chris introduces himself, we'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves and share a little bit about what they're doing. A lot of them are doing very important and very cool work in the recovery space right now. And I also just wanted to give a shout out to Workit's very own Dom, who is amazing and also was going to moderate this panel along with Chris, but is now not able to make it tonight. So I'm stepping in here for Dom, and we love you if you're watching virtually. And I will hand it over to Chris if you want to introduce yourself and have the panelists introduce themselves and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Callie. My name is Chris. I am a care navigator here for Workit Health. I myself am also in recovery, and I also am part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm really honored to be able to talk to you guys, honestly. So why don't we go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves. Tracy, you're first on my list.
Hi, my name is Tracy. I use they, them pronouns. I quit drinking in January of 2016. And currently the work that I'm doing right now is primarily focused on helping people who are realizing that they are not straight after they have entered recovery. So it's a pretty common thing that that I've been working on, like helping people navigate that.
Thank you. And then Sean?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Paul Mahoney. I am a writer and a program manager for the Mental Health and Addiction Association here in Portland, Oregon. I, in addition to writing and contributing to Workit Health, I also have my own site called shauntologs.com. And I've been writing about my own recovery since like 2012. And then I have a book called Now That You've Stopped Dying. And then I also work as a peer recovery mentor and a program manager inside hospital spaces and jails and other institutions here in Portland, Oregon, helping people with substance use disorders and mental health. So it's nice to be here.
Thank you. And Shauntelle?
Hi, everyone. My name is Shauntelle. I use she, her pronouns. I am a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means that I have not used alcohol or any illicit drugs since September of 2015. I identify as a Black queer trans femme and a gender nonconforming Black queer trans femme. My work that I do, I am the executive director of Peter's Place RVA, which is the first LGBTQIA plus recovery organization in the state of Virginia. We have the first and only recovery house for the LGBTQIA plus community. And that's the work that I've been currently working on. And I'm also a full-time college student at Virginia Commonwealth University, where I'm a part of their collegiate recovery program, Rams in Recovery.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So just a little bit why we're here. I'm super excited to have you guys here and all those people joining us virtually for this. In the chat, we did add a couple documents. One of them is a list of different identities, as well as definitions that we might be hearing a lot of. So if you're not sure of any, you can go ahead and refer to that. There will also be a list of resources that are available to you as well. I will pause a moment and say that when we were starting to do the resource list, it was really disheartening to see how little resources were available. And it even drove Dom and me even more to make sure that this is something special to spread a message. So just a little bit as well that this is October and it is LGBTQ History Month. And secondly, just some stats that we wanted to throw out. LGBTQ plus community is disproportionately impacted by substance use in comparison to our non-LGBTQ plus counterparts. Queer adults are twice as likely to use illicit drugs. The LGBTQ plus youth are 190% more likely to be impacted by substance abuse, with some subpopulations actually reaching 400% or more. This epidemic continues to permeate our communities. We're excited to look to you guys and gals to help us with this situation that we are experiencing. We came up with a series of questions, no particular order. So whenever any of you want to chime in and start, go ahead and take over. We are going to leave about 10 minutes at the end, so that way people with questions can go ahead and get those questions asked. So to get started with our first question, what has been your experience being an LGBTQ plus person in recovery, and how does it differ from being someone who doesn't identify as LGBTQ plus? And how did you find the LGBTQ plus community within that? So anyone that wants to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I could start if no one else wants to right now. I'm always willing to talk, to fill space. So for me personally, especially in the beginning, it was I would kind of explain it as or describe it as lonely, just because so many of the programs and resources and like even just like websites and everything that you see is just so heteronormative in how they, even down to the and gender binary and how they like split everything into men's and women's, or it's always assumed that people are dealing with heterosexual relationships or what have you, or having to carry like the extra weight of explaining your queerness while you are talking to people who are in recovery as well. So early on, it was difficult and it felt really lonely. But I was able to really find a lot of community, very specifically on Instagram. I found a lot of community on Instagram, and I'm currently taking a break from social media, but I've really found a really great group of friends that I've been able to reach out to in person, and also, we text and we email and follow each other on Instagram. So it's been great because wherever I go, I can find someone that I know wherever I am in the country, as all of us have been talking ahead of time about how I like to move all over the country all the time. That's handy for me. But yeah, it's that the internet. And I mean, the LGBT community has been an early adopter of using the internet to find each other anyway. So I just think of it as leveling up from that.
All right, I'll jump in. So for me, it was hard. Let's just be honest. There's not many trans individuals in recovery, but also not many trans people of color. So I also carry that identity with me too, that like being a person of color in these spaces that I have to navigate, racism and things like that, but also being a trans person, I have to deal with transphobia, not only in communities that are cisgendered, heterosexual, but also in the LGBTQIA plus community. And there's also racism, there's also transphobia and all these things. So for me, it was figuring out how to navigate this. I started creating my own spaces, that I no longer wanted to center myself in spaces that did not know how to support me. I no longer wanted to center myself in white spaces. So I created my own spaces, and I found a community through other people that I connected with, but majority online is something that I a community that I have been building lately since the pandemic. So yeah, how I navigated those spaces, that I walked away from those spaces and decided that I would no longer help build or help these spaces succeed that are not built for me, and just started building my own spaces.
Thank you. For me, so disclaimer, I basically got sober in queer Disneyland. I got sober in Los Angeles. So every meeting, wherever was, I mean, there's lots of gay meetings, but it's LA, so everything's a gay meeting, right? So I am very fortunate that I got sober around my folks, and I didn't know what it looked like to be a gay man and to be sober. So when I walked into the rooms in 2009, I really had to relearn it. I often say that I came out of the closet and walked into a bar, and that's really what happened. And so I had to sort of like walk out of that bar and walk into a different space. And thank God in LA, I got sober around gay people, trans people, non-binary people, Black, white, Korean, Latinx, like the whole thing. And like I said, I'm extremely privileged. I will say, you know, when I started writing, it was really born out of this idea, like every book that I was reading and memoir that I was reading was like all freaking people and pretty much white people, and usually white women. And like, I heart you, white women, but oh my God, I'm not a white woman. And me getting sober as a gay man with those numbers is so different than Judy from the suburbs. So like, I really started writing from that and blogging from that perspective of a gay man and a very queer take on recovery. And because it didn't exist. And I really wrote for myself, and that the fact that anybody identified with it and read it is a freaking miracle. But that, I mean, I find that like, it is hard, but it's also, given that the need is so high and where I work, it's needed, right? And I'm inspired by hearing my co-panelists talk about making their own spaces, because if you do, people will show up right now. We need more support than ever. So yeah.
Thank you guys for your responses. The next question we have is, being in recovery in sorts is finding a new identity. What would you tell someone who is transitioning through identities and finding oneself in recovery as well?
I mean, I can go first again. I didn't want to jump in. That actually is like something that I do a lot, is talking to people who are figuring out both sometimes their recovery and sometimes their sexuality or their gender identity while they're in recovery. And the number one thing I tell people, especially as they're transitioning identities in their sexuality and in their gender, is to, people oftentimes like really focus on the label, what am I, what am I, what am I? And I tell them a lot of the times to focus on the feeling, like focus on how language makes you feel, focus on how people make you feel, focus on, are you attracted to this person? And like, look at those different kinds of aspects of that person, and what about that person is attractive to you. And that also can be translated into people in early recovery, or who are thinking about quitting whatever substance it is that they're abusing, right? Because they can go into that and be like, oh, like, is it bad enough? But just think about, like, not worry about if you have a problem, worry about how is it making you feel. And so it's very much something that is the ways that we go through the discovery between our sobriety and our sexual identities are often very parallel in how we go through the process of it, and all of the steps along the way to come into acceptance of it and to be able to like work with it and like blossom. So yeah.
So for me, this is something that I actually went through in recovery. So First, before I jump into it, I just wanted to acknowledge that, all queer people are not like, it's not about sexuality, all queer people are not gay. Some queer people are straight, some are bisexual. So when you're dealing with queer people, it's a lot more than just sexuality. You have to look at the person as a whole, as their gender identity and things like that, their gender expression. And for me, what I would tell someone is like encouraging them to be their self, but also telling them that it's going to be hard because it's not easy. That people are going to say things that are going to hurt you. Some people are going to deny who you are, and you have to find that for yourself, but you also owe yourself a place of peace and safety, and you can walk away from any of those spaces whenever you feel like it, and you're not forced to be there. The recovery is not linear. There's no set way to recovery. You don't have to stick to a certain recovery program, because when I got in recovery, these are things that were told to me, that I needed to do this program, that this is the only thing that works, and I needed to come around. And a lot of those places were hurtful and harmful to me. And I had to figure out for myself that I had to step away from these spaces, that I no longer believed in what these programs were teaching me or what the people in these programs were saying and doing to me. And I had to find programs that work for me, that I would tell this individual, believe in yourself, follow your heart, and know when something's not right. If it's not right for you, please move along and find something in life that will make you feel good, because your safety and happiness is more important than anything else. And you can't stay sober if you're miserable.
Yeah, working with folks in the hospital and people in new recovery, one of the biggest questions we always get is, and straight or queer or anything in between, is, well, how do you navigate having friends, and how do you have a life once you've given up something that is so cemented? And I will speak only from my experience, but I coming out was very entrenched in drugs and alcohol, and then everyone I hung out with was queer and used. And so when I stopped, those 8-10 people that were around me all the time, they disappeared too. Nobody wants to hang out with the sober dude, they're like, bye. And so I really had to invent what that looked like, and find people who were on the same path. And it is harder and it is lonelier, I think, but I have to remember, like, what I love working with our people is that we're so freaking resilient, and we have a desire to find support in our own groups. And I think, like, I'm so lucky. I am surrounded by gay men who are all sober and for years. And I have support from all different types of people. And that's something that I didn't have when I was drinking. And so I think the biggest thing is like embracing that process of being able to look at, like, I get to reinvent myself, not that I have to. I get to kind of have a higher bar with friendships, and I get to expect more out of the people in my life. And I think that that's helpful. It is for me anyway.
You guys all shared a bunch of nuggets in there. I appreciate that. So another question that we came up with is, how can being an LGBTQ plus person shape your experience in a sober living environment?
I'll jump in on that one. So as a person who lived in sober living, I can only talk from my own experience that it was very hard being a queer trans person. I was put into spaces that I had to hide my identity in order to have a safe place to live, in order to receive recovery support. That majority of recovery houses that I know of and have experienced put you in this binary of either you fit with men or women, and it's all dependent on your sex assigned at birth, and nothing more than that. So for individuals who live outside of that binary, we are put into places of not having recovery housing or recovery support, or put into places of like having to hide ourselves in order to have a place or to have somewhere that's safe. And for me, that's why I kind of started the organization that I did, so that like individuals don't have to hide in recovery housing, but they can also be free and, and just be open and be true to who they are, and not put into this space of like, if I tell people who I am, I'm going to be kicked out, or I won't be accepted, or they're going to tell me, like I was told majority of the time, most of the time, that I need to like calm myself down, which really means is like hide my queerness in order to fit in and be accepted, or and stay into the places that I was in, trying to receive help, which didn't help me because I couldn't heal as a person in recovery in the space that I had to hide any of my identity. So for me, I ended up getting sober in a homeless shelter and on the streets. And then I moved into sober living after I got myself together, because I could not sit in those spaces and hide who I was to get support that wasn't even built to support me. And yeah, is a real problem for queer people, especially gender nonconforming and trans individuals who have to live into these heteronormative spaces that we're told that our identities are not valid.
I'll hop in on that one too. I didn't go to sober living, but I constantly am helping people find sober living. And in super queer Portland, where I live, we now finally have one LGBTQ plus sober living, which is unacceptable to me. And because I think, as was just touched on brilliantly by my co-panelists, I think that culturally specific recovery is really important. And when it comes to housing too, even from a safety aspect, because you're often living side by side with folks who have just left corrections. And so it's better. It makes more sense. And we found there's studies that have found that culturally specific recovery is successful and it works. And so, given the time of year that it is and what everybody's doing next Tuesday, please vote for people in your community who support recovery and who support robust bills on substance use disorders. We are having a fentanyl epidemic here on the West Coast, and it's hitting LGBTQ plus people here in Portland. I just left 2 meetings about that yesterday. And so I think now more than ever, when it comes to sober living, I think it's a buyer beware situation. It's not entirely a safe place. And unless you know what you're getting into and there's other queer people there, I would say maybe not,
I have nothing to add to this because have no experience with sober living. So
Yeah, I know for myself, I've lived in a sober living. I did for a year and a half, and there was about 60 people actually at this place, and the amount of people that were there that were of the community was like 5, and we were a mighty 5 to say the least. We had to like really, be best of friends. So I do agree with everyone that there needs to be. I think it's great, Shauntelle, that you're doing this. That you're trying to start one and get it going in an area that needs it. That's kudos, massive kudos to you for that. So finding a relationship in our community is a challenge in its own. What would you recommend for someone in recovery in this situation?
I can start. I think that my number one thing that I would recommend would be to, I guess I have 2 things. All right. Okay. 2 things that I would recommend. The first one would, for me personally, I've just always been very super upfront that I don't drink. I am sober. It's not that I don't drink just because I don't like it. I am sober. And that ends up weeding out all of the people who can't even like handle that anyway. And then like the second thing is just like, don't settle. Just don't settle, because I was single for four years, like completely single, didn't even like go, like had a lot of first dates. But it was just one of those things where it was really hard to find someone who was kind of like also interested in growing in the same way that someone in recovery is interested in growing and like learning about themselves, especially who is also age appropriate, and also, you know, just all of like the things that I had. Like I had a list of things that I wanted, and it was really hard to find someone. And I actually I ended up meeting someone during a pandemic somehow, by accident somehow. I early in the pandemic, I was hosting like Zoom calls for sober queer people, and she showed up to one of the calls and then messaged me on Facebook after that. But it was just like, it was just perfect. And it worked out perfectly. And she was everything on my list. And I'm like, oh God, I'm so glad I didn't settle for someone who like wasn't everything. And I think it's just like, we deserve to find someone who is everything that we want, because we are worthy of the, like, whatever love we think we're worthy of, we're worthy of more love than that. And so I think just like remembering that good enough is not good enough. And that's it's hard, and it takes a lot of patience, but I think that's my number one.
For me, my advice would be take time to heal, figure out who you are, love yourself, right? Because a lot of us, when we come into this program or when we come into recovery, whatever that looks like for us, that we come with a lot of trauma, a lot of things that have happened to us in our life, a lot of like, you know, triggers and bad things that a lot of us go through as being queer people that we need time to heal. We need time to love ourselves. We need time to figure out who we are, especially if you throw recovery on top of it. You're living in a new skin, you're living a new life. Some of us are learning who we are for the very first time. Then you need to take time to actually experience that and let that nourish and develop. And don't rush, because like for me personally, when I got into recovery, I did therapy. Therapy is like I'm an advocate for that. Go to therapy. Just going to recovery meetings is not enough. But like I was sitting with my therapist and we were talking about things like this, and it came to me in that room that like I didn't heal enough. I didn't love myself enough. I didn't know myself enough, and I had so much stuff to get through that any relationship that I got into would be toxic. And I had to realize that for myself. So for me, it was about healing and learning who I am, but also becoming a better person and learning how to love myself sober. So that's my advice.
So yeah, I mean, I'm admittedly sort of a disaster in the relationship zone, but so I'm not great to give out that advice. But what I will say is, to echo what was just said, is that getting to know myself first. I drank and used from the age of 14 till I was 36. So I didn't know what healthy relationships looked like, and I didn't know who I was. And so I needed that year and a half before I started dating, and then was in that relationship for 9 years. And hindsight being what it is, I think I probably needed like another year before I got into a relationship. I have been divorced now for a year, and what I'll tell you about like dating sober at 40 is that like it is about being honest. And particularly for gay men, I will speak to the fact that like putting that on apps, that you're sober, so you don't run the risk of hooking up with people who are high. That is really huge on apps, hooking up with people on meth. And so just really putting that out there and owning that, so you A, are energetically attracting folks who are sober, and B, protecting yourself, right? Because you don't want to end up in situations that are triggering or that could potentially make you use. So yeah, I mean, it's been a long, slow process, and I waffle back and forth in it. I'm inspired that Tracy found love in COVID. That's amazing. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. The next question, and Shauntelle kind of touched base on this. A lot of people who identify as LGBTQ plus have dealt with trauma, myself included. So I'm really interested in hearing your guys' responses. How do you cope with the intersectionality of identity, recovery, and trauma?
I'll start. There's only one way for me to cope with it is to go to therapy. Like there's nothing else, because like I can't get through this by myself. I can't figure it out by myself. I need someone else to coach me, to be there, talk me through it, to help me process these things and learn how to move forward from it and how to grow. And but also to recognize these experiences and know when like these things might pop up again and how to deal with them and things like that. Like I can't deal with trauma without going to therapy, and there's no other way with doing that. And through therapy I learned different things and different coping skills and other ways to help me navigate that. So go to therapy. I'm an advocate for it. I'm going to say it 100 times: go to therapy. If you don't go to therapy, go to therapy.
I'll hop in. Therapy for sure. I have early childhood trauma involving a lot of violence inside of my family unit. And then also I was held up at gunpoint. And what I have to remember, thanks to a great therapist, is that drugs and alcohol helped with that trauma until they didn't, right? Like they were my coping mechanism when I didn't have any others. And so when I took away that coping mechanism, I needed to figure out what I was trying to heal. But it took me a long time, you guys, to get to deal with my own trauma. Like I didn't get into PTSD therapy until I had 9 years sober. We have a long storied career with substances like I did. Shit just moves slower. And so it took the time. And, you know, my therapist was like, thank God you did it when you did, because I don't know if you'd be able to handle all of this at 2 years sober. So it all happened for a reason, right? And I think the biggest thing is not navigating it alone. Was directed by people in recovery who were like, hey, meetings are great, but they're not going to help with that. You need to go talk to somebody. And again, you know, it's unfortunate that so many systems don't have therapists easily available or cheap or free. So vote for people who support that kind of thing too. That's all I have.
Of course, therapy. Yes. And I think too, what's important to remember, and what's been important for me to remember, is that small events can also be traumatic, because trauma is situational based on the person. So remembering that things that even maybe I didn't think of in the moment can come back and like cause a reaction for me 20, 30 years later. Even as someone who, I came out when I was a teenager, I was like pretty well accepted. And then I'm just in sobriety now, realizing a lot of the like homophobic kinds of things that were said and done to me in my teen years and my early 20s. And I'm reckoning with all of that now. And it really wasn't even until the past couple of years that I've been doing that, which has, I was, 2 or 3 years into sobriety when I was like, oh, wow, look at all of this that I didn't even realize. So I think that remembering that it can be small stuff too is helpful in not minimizing the experiences that we've had and how they impact us.
Thank you, guys. So the next question is, some LGBTQ plus people do not feel comfortable with the religious or spiritual concepts involved with 12-step programs. Do you have experience with this? Do you have advice? how can people get involved without participating in these specific types of recovery communities?
I can go. I actually didn't use 12 steps at all. So the first 3 months that I was sober, I just kind of like white knuckled it, which, as you can imagine, was very uncomfortable, not sustainable, not something I could do. I also, though, was not interested in going to in-person meetings at all. I wasn't that it was just, I mean, I don't know if it would have worked for me or not, going to 12 steps, but it's just not the path that I took. I ended up finding online recovery programs that ended up working for me that worked really well. And I did an 8-week sobriety school, and it changed my life, and it taught me how to actually like live a life without alcohol that I didn't want to escape from. And that was the number one thing for me. There are so many different kinds of recovery programs, both online and in person, that there's such a wide variety of options now. And I know from the people that I know who run a lot of these programs that they're not religion based. They're very open for queer and trans people, and it's a place where like community is really fostered. That's been my experience, which is really no experience at all with 12 steps. I feel like I don't know a lot of people who have zero experience with 12 steps, but I am one of those people. So yeah.
Yeah. So first I want to acknowledge that 12 Steps is not a religious-based program. It's more of a spiritual-based program. As a person who has done 12 Steps for majority of the time that I've been in recovery, I had to learn, like most places, like, and most things that I had to learn to take away things that I needed and things that that didn't resonate with me, things that I could not use, things that did not work for me, just leave them where they are. Because like, just to be honest, any recovery space that I walk into, majority of the stuff is not built for me as a trans woman, as a Black person or anything like that. So I had to learn how to take things out of it, what I needed and what I couldn't use, just throw that shit away and continue to move on. But I found a lot of things in different programs of recovery. There's a lot of different programs out there besides 12 steps. There's like Smart Recovery, there's Recovery Dharma, there's Celebration Recovery, which is that is religious based, but that's a whole nother thing. And there's so many other things, but I also can't deny that some people that are a part of this community are religious and they need those spaces, right? And I can't take that from them. So for me, it's just like finding what works for you. If it doesn't work for you, go online and Google it. Ask other people what worked for them, what do they need. Ask them about different meetings, right? Because like, honestly, no space is going to be perfect. No space is going to have everything that you need. And no space is going to support every single person in every community. So it's about finding what works for you, and what doesn't work for you, just leave it there and continue to come back and just take what works for you.
Yeah, I got sober, like I said at the beginning, in AA in Los Angeles in 2009. And again, not religious at all in LA. And I have been to AA meetings all over the world, and sometimes in the middle of the country, it gets a little Jesus-y, but in and of itself, 12-step programs are not religious. They're more spiritual based. And like that, like it's all suggestion. It's not a cult. And the thing to remember that an amazing Harvard study that's new had said is that it's a free resource, right? And an effective free resource. After the largest sampling that's ever been studied on AA, they found that it's effective. And it's effective because this goes back in a different clinical direction, is that connection is really the key. So whether you're finding it online, whether you're finding it in Smart Recovery, whether you're finding it in yoga, whether you're finding it in AA or NA or CMA, the real magic sauce that I've noticed in my workplace and noticed in my own life is the connection with other people who have substance use disorders. We need one another. And whatever that space is, where that is, I celebrate that and I encourage people to find it. And wherever you're comfortable in that space, I can't say enough good things about queer meetings. I just they saved my life. Sober queer people taught me how to live, and I am forever indebted. I didn't know how to do it. And so that's the big thing I take out of any meeting is just the experience of others. So I don't feel alone. This is a disease of isolation. So when I'm around my people, even just sitting here with y'all, I feel good because you guys get it, right? And so, and that's the thing. So I try to maybe put aside the stuff that I don't agree with and really focus on the connection piece because I need it to stay alive.
Yeah, I know for myself, I do the 12-step side of things. And I know working here with Workit Health and meeting so many people, there's so many ways to work on your recovery. And I think a lot of the judgment I might have had has definitely lessened 100%. My thing is I just hope everyone finds happiness. And if you can find happiness within yourself, more power to you at that point. So I agree, community is everything in this. Uh, so this question I like a lot. What would you tell your younger self who was struggling with identities and recovery?
All right. So what I would tell my younger self, listen to yourself, you know who you are. Don't listen to other people. Because for me, dealing with a lot of things as a kid and, gender identity, gender expression and things like that, that I knew that what the norm was considered wasn't who I was. And I knew what people told me was not who I am. And for many of years, I pushed that inside and didn't listen to it and denied myself for being my true self. But that came with a lot of using and drinking to help me hide, but also to help with all that pain and things like that. So for me, I would tell my younger self that you are valid, you are worth it, and you belong here, and you are loved. You're loved by yourself and continue to love yourself and everything that you see yourself as and believe who you are, and don't listen to other people and don't let no one tell you who you are. You defined your realness.
I'll go. Yeah, I think for me, it's a chicken and an egg situation when I was a kid. I don't know which came first, me using or me starting to realize that I was gay. So I really would tell my younger self to that I was enough. I always felt less than. I always felt weird. I always felt out of place. I always felt like I didn't deserve what everybody else had. And if I just would have heard I'm enough as I am, and it's okay that I don't fit in a mold, that would have gone a really long way, right? Just to hear that I don't have to change. I don't have to be in sports. I don't have to be interested in what other boys are interested in. If I would have heard that, it would have been like a game changer. I don't think I would have fallen down the path that I fell down at 14 with drugs and alcohol and at such an accelerated rate. I used heroin by the time I was 20. So it really went off the rails very quickly. And I think had I heard something just that simple in the beginning, it would have totally been different.
Yeah. I think for me, uh, I I would have wanted to say that hey Tracy, you are worthy just as you are. Like you're completely fine and perfect just as you are. You don't have to try to emulate the other bush lesbians at the bar. You don't have to like try to be something different. You don't have to change the way you dress because your partner wants you to dress differently. Like you are perfect just the way you are, and you're worthy of more love than you can imagine. And I think that would have that I probably would have been like, I wouldn't have listened, but if I would listen, that would have changed my life.
So people out there viewing, you do have the ability to go ahead and ask questions at the Q&A at the bottom. We also have the chat. You could throw some questions out there. I have one last question for you guys before we open it to them. So where can we follow you guys? Where can we see your work? All of that fun stuff. So whoever wants to chime in.
I'll go. Like I said in the beginning ish, I'm kind of like off of social media right now. So the only account that I have that is not deactivated is my Twitter. So you can find me at Twitter at Murph the Jerk. Um, or you can go to, I have two websites up right now. One is LGBTteetotalers, where there's stories of queer and trans people who are in recovery that I had posted for a while, and a bunch of blog posts and everything there. And I have a mailing list. I also have a website, tracylmurphy.com, and that is all about my sexual identity mentoring that I'm doing to help people who are adults and or in recovery who are figuring out their sexuality.
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook. My organization, Peter's Place RVA. You can find us on Instagram at Peter's Place RVA. Our website, petersplacerva.org. You can follow me on social media, well, on Facebook, Shauntelle Hammonds. And yeah, that's how you can find me.
You can find me at Sean Paul Mahoney on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can read some of my pieces at Workit Health and on my website, shauntologs.com. And then my book, Now That You Stop Dying, is available on amazon.com.
Great, great. All right, guys, we have a few questions here that we're going to get through. So this is from Liana. Hello, I have been in recovery for 7 years, give or take. I am struggling with my gender identity and have faced so much transphobia. I recently started my transition process by meeting with medical care providers and asking lots of questions to get educated and figuring out what transitioning looks like. Exploring, this is going to be uncomfortable, but I am at a point where I feel comfortable exploring. I have noticed such an increase in my negative coping strategies. It's been difficult to meet people like myself, and I don't know where to turn. What has helped you guys in this exploration process? I find myself trying to numb out, especially after experiencing phobic acts. I feel like people don't understand.
Ooh, that's a lot. I'll jump in on this one. I relate to everything that you said as a trans femme individual. What I found in recovery space is that people don't relate, they don't know. But there are quite a few people who try to understand or who are supportive. Find those people and stick with them. But also, yeah, I understand a lot about like being the only person in the room. I am still searching for another Black trans person, period. And I've never seen one in a recovery space. I found a couple online. There are online meetings. I found a few, but in physical spaces in five years, I have not seen another trans person of color, masculine or feminine. So usually I am the only person in the space when I step into those spaces. And something I had to tell myself is that, like, I'm there for me. I'm there to recover, to get myself healthy. And it's not always easy. It's hard as hell sometimes. Um, but I have to like focus on what's important for me and like getting myself together. And when it doesn't feel good, being okay with saying this does not feel good and I can step away from this. And I do not have to put myself in this space that does not feel good, does not feel safe for me. Um, and just finding what works for you. It's a struggle. It's hard. Definitely. I will send you my email and information if you want to reach out, you want to talk offline, and I can tell you some more stuff, support you, or just be there to listen if you want that, or if you need that, because I understand the hurt, because I haven't walked into a recovery space that understood me or knew how to support me yet in 5 years. And even in spaces that I had to work in, that I had to build those spaces for myself. Recovery programs that I went to, I had to make space for myself. I had to start my own meetings and things like that just to get the support that I need, but to also have the space for myself that was safe. I understand the struggle, and I'll definitely send you my contact information if you ever want to talk or need support.
So the next question here, this is from Elizabeth, and she says, how do you deal with the fear of relapse? As a person who is 23 and got sober at 19, it feels like there is so much time left for this to happen. My roommate and I are both young, queer, and sober, and although we know relapse does not define your recovery and is natural for many people, the fear of slipping up is still there, especially as we both have almost 4 years.
So, first of all, that's amazing to be that young and to have that much time. So congratulations. And you're right. Like the fear, I think the fear is okay to have a fear of relapse, right? And particularly right now. And what we know is relapse numbers are really high and overdose numbers are really high. So it's okay to be afraid of it. And also owning it in a space and talking about it, it's it lessens it, and it's also courageous for you to do, because just by asking that question somebody else goes, oh my god, I've been afraid of that too. So thank you for bringing that up. And also, like, the world needs young queer people to stay sober. So I hope that you get support, and I hope that you keep talking about it, and you and your roommate are there to support each other. I think you guys are like, I mean, you're the future of queer people, and we're going to need you and to help other folks, particularly right now. We talk about my work that this is like the pandemic inside of the pandemic with what's going on with addiction. So all I can say is that's a healthy fear, and it doesn't have to be a part of your story. People do come back, but people also don't come back. I lost a friend to an overdose, who was a gay man, and he died 2 weeks ago. And so what I know from that is you don't have to go out like that. There's support, and just keep going. You'll ride through it. And I'm super proud of you, and I'm glad you asked that question.
So this question is from Bobby, and it says, what would you say to a person who was traumatized by a therapist and wants help?
I can try to answer this one if no one else does. So I've actually, gosh, been in this situation. and I could totally relate. So I could just tell you how I navigated the whole entire thing. I was traumatized by a therapist, when in early recovery, talking about gender identity and things like that. And for me, it took a long time to trust another person. I stopped going to therapy. It took me a while to trust another person or even think about going to therapy. But in the long run, that hurt me more than it helped me, there was a lot of unhealed stuff that I didn't get to work on because I let someone else, you know, hinder my growth. So, like my advice and like what I say at work, if that person is traumatizing to you or triggering or traumatic in any way, then find someone else. Find someone else that will help you and give you the support and the care that you need, because like you don't have to go through that in order to get help. Like just find another therapist. I know it's hard, but there's some really good therapists out there that will definitely help you.
Thank you. So this is an anonymous question. It says, so living in a small town, I understand the importance of finding not only your recovery community, but an LGBTQ community as well. Any suggestions outside of PFLAG or rainbow meetings, as there are none where this person is at?
Go. The beautiful thing about right now with Zoom, like you can go to LGBTQ meetings in LA, you can go to LGBTQ meetings in New York, you can do ones in Paris. If you go to a website called Gay and Sober, they have a list of LGBTQ meetings and links to other websites. So that's like a way to kind of first dip your toe in the water and navigate that. And so you kind of get both, right? You'll get the, and it's not just AA meetings, they have all kinds of stuff listed on there. And now any fellowship too also has, if you go to Smart Recovery, if you go to NA, if you go to CMA, like they all have links to their online meetings, and most of them will specify if there's LGBTQ meetings too. So I hope that helps.
And if you're looking for like in-person connection too, you said a small town, so I don't know how small or like how far you are from any like metro area, but you can try meetup.com. There's a lot of times like sober groups or queer sober groups that might meet up. Right now, I'm sure they're mostly virtual, but in non-pandemic times, that has been successful for some people. And also, never underestimate the power of social media. If you just look up hashtags on Instagram or on Twitter that are things like, sober queer or like anything like that, you'll find that there are a lot more people who are in recovery and part of the LGBT community than who are near you than you ever realized. So if you have access to that, that's a really handy tool that I've been able to utilize myself.
Well, we're coming to an end right now. I really want to thank you guys for being a part of this. Like I said, when I was asked to start this and starting doing research, I hit so many roadblocks with this, and which is unfortunate. So I'm really glad that we're able to use this platform to reach people that need it, especially right now with COVID going on. So that's about the time right now. I again want to thank you guys so much for your time. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Y'all are in late time.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. To the people who are attendees who may not have pre-registered, if you would like to get an email of this recording and our resource list emailed you and how you can follow, contact our panelists, then please put your email in the chat. And I'll be sending out an email later in the week with a recording and also links to where you can find our panelists and our definitions and our resources lists that we had mentioned earlier. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Bye.